Join us as we welcome our very first guest, Chelsea Hope. Chelsea is a dear sister of mine. She's a devoted mother, mentor for conception and preconception, an innate postpartum care practitioner, and a practitioner of Womb Hara Massage. She hails from the sacred Bundjalung country in the Northern Rivers and is the driving force behind Roots in Ritual. With Chelsea, we embark on a journey to redefine how we navigate the sacred rites of passage, from menstruation and conception to postpartum and the journey beyond menopause. Her work empowers us to reclaim our power, to rewrite our connection to the feminine and embrace our truth, to offer the earth the integrated medicine and embodiment of womanhood in all its glory. Stay tuned for our captivating conversation with Chelsea Hope on Wisdom in the Waters. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the very first episode of Wisdom in the Waters. Journey with me through wisdom and conversations with special guests every episode. I'm just going to grab Chelsea and invite her to join our call. One moment. I'll just let some time for. Let me know if you guys can hear me okay. Chelsea!
Hello!
Hello, my love. Welcome.
Hello, thank you. So good to be here with you.
So good to see you. Welcome. Awesome. So everybody, this is Chelsea Hope. She is mother, mentor of preconception and conception, an innate postpartum care practitioner. Let me know if you can hear me. There's a bit of feedback.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I
can
can
just
hear
hear
you.
myself. Okay, great.
Yeah, okay.
Awesome.
Well, this is, we just have to orient to this live, new space.
Yeah, and I'm so excited to have you here and just welcome the community to all the wonderful mothers and sisters and practitioners that we share in common and we share the knowledge. I feel like it's almost selfish to have these conversations just between us, and there's so much energy and potent magic that comes from us just speaking and learning from each other that this project was birthed.
Yeah, and I also really resonate with that of like that it's important to have these conversations and put these conversations out there. And I think a lot of women that I know are like they're looking for this information, this knowledge, like they're wanting more to know like how to connect to their power and their sovereignty when it comes to bringing babies to earth. And so it's amazing that we have this technology that we can sit down here. You're in Sydney, I'm here, and we're having these conversations.
Yeah. Oh, so good. So I'm going to start. I've got a little list of questions because this is the first one. We're just like getting into it, learning how to how to do the lives and ask the right questions to get the answers that to inspire answers that we may be looking for that might inspire other women or other birthing people. So can you share with us how your personal journey began and how you got involved with preconception and conception work? I know you're trained in innate postpartum care and your womb hara massage. So can you tell us a little bit about, that journey? And like you said, it actually reminded me that you said that we've known each other through so many cycles.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful, from maiden to mother and just watching each other's journeys. So I would love for you to share some of that knowledge and your story.
Yeah. Okay. I was actually reflecting on this not that long ago, and I remember it must not have been too long before Forrest was conceived. And I really felt like a calling to step into supporting birth and becoming a doula. And back then I felt like I was so naive and I didn't really know much of anything. And not long after that, Forrest's dad and I really felt her spirit come through. And we hadn't been together. We hadn't really been together that long. So it was like a big thing of like, can we do this? Can we trust this? And we did. We consciously conceived Forrest, and yeah, she came in pretty quickly. She was ready. She was there. And I think, again, like the pregnancy was so wild. Like I didn't know much of of how big that journey was going to be. And I remember with us, like our dear friend Hannah, it was me. I felt I conceived Forrest.
Yeah.
And then it was 10 weeks later, Hannah was pregnant. And then 10 weeks later, it was you. And so it was really beautiful to share that journey, like, especially for us, like this was our first time coming into this rite of passage. And it was the second time for Hannah. So it was beautiful to have her support and her guidance and her wisdom. But yeah, I had so much come up for me in my pregnancy, like a lot of fears, a lot of doubts, and yeah, I didn't really feel like equipped to, like, some things I was like, okay, but a lot of it really, it shook me. And I had a home birth with Forrest, and that really also brought me to my edges. It was a 48-hour labor at home, and for the majority of it, it was just Cam and my mum, and that was like a really big thing, having my mum there. And it was like really healing for our lineage of her witnessing like a birth at home without any intervention. But there were moments where I really was challenged and really met like a threshold, like a point of like, can I do this? And I did do it.
You did it.
I did do
And
it.
had a beautiful birth.
I had a beautiful birth.
Yeah.
And but coming into my postpartum, I think, was the most challenging.
Would
I
you
think
say that was like the pinnacle moment of your, I guess if we say career as a birth worker or postpartum, that's kind of what got you to where you are now? Or I think all the steps may have led you to that. But in conversation,
yeah.
I know. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think for the first year, like the postpartum, I was really not prepared for that. I didn't really have at the time, and now I can look back and see that like the consciousness of when we bring children to earth, that they realign our lives. They realign us to our purpose. They realign us to the people that are supposed to be in our lives. So I went through a huge purging of like a community and realigning with people, places, like we moved and all of these things. Like it was like a huge realignment and just purging of the old, of all of the things that it could no longer be, because that is postpartum. It's a death. You know, we have the we're growing and we're coming to full peak, full bloom in our pregnancy, and then we birth, and then it descends into a death, into the unknown, and we are rebirthing ourselves. Like we've birthed our babies, but we need to rebirth ourselves as mothers. And so I think that I was really not prepared for that, and maybe also a little bit like holding on to my maiden self. And so that really brought me through my own like challenges, and it's also a collective challenge of not having the culture kind of honor properly the rite of passage of pregnancy, birth, but also postpartum, and having yeah, the right amount of support that we need as mothers to
Sure.
come into our full expansion of what motherhood can offer us. And so I think, yeah, that led me to Rochelle's work with Innate Traditions, and that was a really life-changing 18 months for me. And just to bring it back into the question is, through diving into postpartum work, it actually brought me into the realization of like harvesting my own medicine from my journey of, well, if I can support women in preconception, which is really from when we bleed, like up until we birth our babies, like conceive our babies and birth our babies, because it's preparing the soil for the seeds that we're going to sow and bring in our babies. So it's not just like what we eat, although that's like a huge part of it. And I know for me, I didn't really have a super nourished body when I came into pregnancy, which then led to a lot of depletion in my postpartum. So I was already in a deficit and trying to catch up with like breastfeeding and staying up all night with
Which is
Forrest.
taxing. It's exhausting.
It's taxing.
Yeah.
So it's like, how can we resource women to come into pregnancy feeling
Fully
nourished,
equipped.
fully equipped
I
on
think
like
we're
all
lacking
levels?
that knowledge and that support, like you said, in the community. We don't have the foundation, and I think the work that we do, yourself, myself, and so many other people in this space, is to create a foundation to support from preconception or from the maiden to menopause. You know, it's like a whole life, and it's a lifestyle. You know, and
It's a
having
lifestyle.
the
Yes.
information to be able to support that, I think that's where the potent magic is, because that's what we're
Yeah.
lacking. I also felt, super, I guess, lost in my first journey as a mother,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
everything you're saying is, I recall us having conversations and being like, oh my God, sharing our, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
the stress, or sharing the things that weren't going so great, but which allowed us to find the answers within those moments of, my life feels like it's falling apart.
Yeah. Yeah. And also that is the energy of pregnancy and birth, because whatever is not in alignment, and it's coming up to be cleared, like our cycle as well. Like when we start bleeding, like that's also like when we come into the luteal phase, it's like, oh, like burn, we're starting to feel the burn and like what needs to be transmuted, and then we can fully let go when we bleed and then realign into a new cycle. But I think a lot of like how I loved what you said there about like it's a lifestyle. It's not that we just arrive at pregnancy and birth and then suddenly like we change and we just show up for that with, we're going to eat really good and we're going to do this, and then when we go back, we'll go back to our lives. It's a lifestyle. It's an embodied way of life. So, and I think that when we come back to our menstrual cycle and we're preparing in that way, we're showing up. We're already orienting to a way of life.
Yes. Oh, I love it. Thank you. I'm a little tear. I'm like, yes, yes.
I know, because
Amazing.
it's so important. And like you said, like I think, I was so grateful to have one another, and I think that is so important, to have women alongside you when you're walking through these thresholds, to like reflect back to one another, like and support one another with
And not be
what's coming
afraid
up.
to reach out.
And yeah, not be and that actually the invitation in pregnancy is to start practicing, or even before, like the best case scenario is actually in our cycle, like in life, just reaching out when we need support, and being brave enough and having the courage to actually receive that support and show our vulnerability, so that, because motherhood is big, it's always changing, and we aren't supposed to do this alone.
Yes.
Yeah.
And can you tell us what was the like the biggest thing or the biggest moment in your training? I think obviously there was a lot of moments, but was there one particular moment that really inspired your work or that kind of pushed you into a certain direction because you do a lot of body work and womb hara
Hmm.
massage? Was that something that came later, um, or throughout your practice? Because I know you're actually a yoga teacher. You have your certification.
Yeah.
So it's beautiful how all the things, they all kind of align, all the work aligns. But was
Hmm.
that something that came after, or you're practicing now in the Northern Rivers, Bundjalung country?
Hmm.
So can you tell us a little bit about that work and what Womb Hara Massage is? Maybe some
Yeah.
of our friends out there aren't familiar with it. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I think like through the journey of innate traditions, it was like a 9-month training and then a 9-month integration. So 18 months all up. And I think the biggest thing that I received from that training was really, how do I resource myself as a mother? Like, how do I really tend to my physiology and therefore tend to my spirit and tend to my emotions and tend to all of the things so that I can show up. And through that, I also really started attuning to, like Rochelle speaks a lot to the way that we are birthed, so our birth imprints and all of those things. So I think when I started diving into more of that work, I started understanding, well, if I can help and support women with doing the work, the foundational work leading up to preconception, clearing out birth imprints, or just understanding and cultivating a relationship with the birth imprints so that they don't, I suppose, govern your life, but you can rather work with them. And yeah, I found Womb Hara, and it was like a full yes for me. And yeah, during that training, like because we were practicing on each other, I really received like how powerful it is. Like I had so much come up for me in that training of just being met with presence in the body, and touching like the abdominal area in the womb, where like when we usually go and get a massage, like practitioners don't really work with this area. And we know that like when we grow inside we're the seeds inside of our grandmothers that our mothers are in, and then we're inside of our mothers, so we have all the beautiful things from them as well, but we're also holding on to a lot of the programs, the traumas and all of these things. So our wombs as well are kind of like, they hold on to a lot of these things. So I suppose and the more that I started offering this work, I started seeing that a lot of these imprints and programs and traumas started to come up and to reveal themselves, and that women were actually able to then reconnect to the origins of their bodies in the roots of their pelvic region, and start to connect more and have more of a connection with their cycle and understanding of their psyche. And this then sets them up for the foundations of coming into pregnancy and then coming into birth, because they're understanding their beliefs and where these things come from. So they're understanding, oh, is this actually mine? Is this what I really think? Or is this what the culture has told me about myself that my grandmother thought, or my mother? So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. How beautiful. And it makes
Yeah,
sense, we feel it in the butterflies in our stomach, like it's the center of energy. Whether it's your
yeah,
stomach or your womb, it's where creation happens. So it makes sense
exactly.
that we hold that energy there, and to be able to have a practice that, you know, to assist in moving that energy. And I think it's beautiful for not only women but for men as well. Yes, it's called Womb
Yeah.
Hara Massage.
Yeah,
But
and
like the fees
we
and
also
the
practice on men. Obviously, we're not
beautiful.
practicing on like the womb region, but we work on, you can work on men on the abdominal area, because Hara is it's like the the abdominal area, like the energy center, the dantian. So it's also really important to start working with these organs, like the major organs of the body, because in pregnancy, everything expands. So all of the emotions and all of the energies that have been held within these parts of the bodies that we don't really come into, well, not all of us come into contact with, they get stretched and moved, and so then everything starts to bubble up to the surface. And it's the same as the uterus. Like, I think that's also why things start coming up in when we're bleeding, because the uterus doubles in size, so it's growing. So then all of the
It's
things
growing
that
for
were,
preparation for pregnancy.
yeah, and then in pregnancy it really starts to expand. So everything starts to, all of the, you know, the things that we've stored in our wombs and in our origin starts to come up. And the same, like the organs start to bubble everything up to the surface too. So yeah, Womb Hara is a really powerful body of work that recognizes this and helps us to connect with our entire ecosystem of our body, and working with like the physical. And then we're working with, because we're working with the physical, we're working then with the emotional and the spiritual and all of these things, because we know that it's interconnected.
We're so blessed to have you as a practitioner of Womb Hara. I am yet to receive a treatment, but I am so looking forward to it. Um,
Yeah,
and you also offer the closing of the bones ceremony.
yeah,
Could you tell us
yeah.
a little bit about this? Because I think it ties into your work with Womb Hara. I'm not sure if it's in the same offering or if it's something that you do as a separate offering. Would you like to tell us a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. So in the Womb Hara, we do use the rebozos, and there is like a wrapping at the end, which is kind of like returning back to the womb and bringing all the energy back in. But I would still say that what even though it's still a wrapping and a closing in the Womb Hara, it's a bit different to the closing of the bones. So I was blessed to learn closing of the bones with Rochelle in the Innate Traditions course journey. And yeah, closing of the bones is, it has origins in Mexico. But what Rochelle has uncovered with her work is there's actually a cross-cultural practice that has its own names in other places. Like in Morocco, they have a similar practice with 7 cloths that they wrap women up in the postpartum time. The same in Russia and many other cultures of the world. So the closing of the bones, what they recognized is that after we birth, because we are
Literally opening the
literally
bones.
opening the bones,
Yeah.
where there's so much expansion in pregnancy. And so what it is to working with the physiology. So after in pregnancy, we have this hormone called relaxin, which helps to relax. It does exactly what it says, like relax, and relaxes everything so that the body can expand. And that hormone also stays with us until we stop breastfeeding. It also plays a role in the menstrual cycle as well. But we want to work with that hormone. So in the postpartum time, especially within the first 6 weeks, when the body is movable and palpable, we're using the rebozos to bring in and close back the body. So we're bringing in like the rib cage, we're bringing in the hips, especially the hips, like closing and sealing off this energy. So both on like a physiological level, but then also like how can we touch that on an energetic level? Like if we're opening ourselves, we're open to the spiritual world and the energies out there to bring down our babies. So we kind of need to close that back off, bringing our energy back in and sealing it. So it's a really, really beautiful practice to also honor the physiology, honor our physical bodies and supporting that, but also honoring the journey of what a woman has been through, what has she crossed, the threshold of pregnancy and birth and bringing a baby down. So in Mexico, I think they would do this like 3 or 4 times. Like it's not just a one kind of, you're working, you're really using that time frame within the 6 weeks to really work with the body. So usually you do a massage before to get, because if we are respecting the postpartum time, we're resting. So the body is lying down, meaning that like there's not a lot of blood flow happening. So we want to get that blood going, flowing, because when there's blood flow, it means that healing is happening because the blood is able to go to the areas and nourish and regenerate. So massaging and then closing. So we're starting from the head and going down the bottom, the body. 7, so it's usually 7 rebozos, or you could just use 1, but you're going down 7 times and wrapping the body and holding. And then usually they do like a temazcal, which is like a sweat, so sweating out, which is also really supportive, like sweating out all of the pregnancy hormones and whatever else that we don't need in the body. So yeah, to answer the question, they're both different. What is
in their
what
own.
is they're in their own different ways, but it's to give honoring to this rite of passage, like a closing and a witnessing, which is essential.
And it's beautiful, and I feel like it's that knowledge that's lacking, because all the words and the wisdom here is about foundational work, is about the preparation, but then also the closing of the ceremony.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of my work, is that body preparation for birth, training the body. I think I was really unprepared for my birth. Like you said, with the knowledge of, your parents and the ancestry, I had an idea of what my birth with my daughter would be like from what I knew of my mother's birth with me. And I was like, yeah, I've got this, and I really didn't go in there prepared, I think, mentally and physically, even though I was studying at the time, doing my doula birth and postpartum certification. But even still, with that knowledge, I was gaining knowledge to pass on as a practitioner, but I don't necessarily think it had landed in my own body and for my own birth in time. And so how I wanted to ask you, how did you feel? I know you had a home birth, a water birth. In this experience, did you feel you were prepared? Did you have those foundations? Was that something that you sought out before the birth of your daughter, or were you unprepared? Were there things that you did differently?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I really love what you brought in there about like you logically felt prepared, like you knew the study and the anatomy and like the like those important things which are important and serve its purpose, but had it actually landed on a body level. And I really resonate. I think I spent a lot of the pregnancy consuming so much information about how to birth and all of these things, but it hadn't actually fully landed on a body level, and that really did come up. in my
Did you, I
birth.
just wanted to ask, did you go to any antenatal class or workshop? Because I know that they are offered a lot in hospitals. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't end up going to one because it was during COVID. So a lot of
Yeah.
resources and things, they had an online one which we didn't participate in.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I felt like, oh, but it's online, like I'm not, I just didn't have the knowledge that maybe it
Yeah.
would help me or I guess that support in that space. Because a big thing for me now with my work is sharing, like holding a workshop to train the body for birth. Yes, you have the innate power and the knowledge
Mm-hmm.
within you, within the DNA, but it's about remembering that and recalling that and training like an athlete would for a race. You have to train your
Mm-hmm.
body to open and for your bones to open and for you to be able to spiritually and go and get your baby and bring it into the physical. So could you
Yeah.
share a little bit about your experience if you felt like,
Yeah.
you were prepared? And also your partner. I know I've just added a whole bunch of questions within a two questions. But do you feel like Cam, your partner, was supported or he felt prepared? Because a big part of that birth preparation is also for the partner to feel empowered and
Mm-hmm.
feel like they know how to hold space, especially if you can't afford a doula or someone to support you, or if
Yeah.
you're a single parent. Like, would you have
Mm-hmm.
any advice from your own experience?
Yeah. Um, and I think just what's coming to me first is about the workshop that you're offering is that exactly, it's like, of course, in an ideal world, we'd love to come back to the innate knowing and the remembrance of like, yes, we know how to birth our babies and we do. But sometimes like there's work that we need to do to come back to that. Like a lot of women are not living in their bodies. They're
Mm-hmm.
living in very masculine lives. So like having a workshop like that is like we're training ourselves to come back, drop back into the body and to trust the body. But that needs to be cultivated, right? So it's important
It's
to have
not
those
like
kind of,
from one moment to the
it's
next.
not, it's a journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like yourself, like it was also COVID, um, when Forrest was born.
Yeah.
And, yeah, for us, we couldn't really afford, like I really wanted to have a home birth. Um, and yeah, I couldn't afford a home birth midwife. So we ended up, doing a crowdfund, a GoFund to raise money for like our friends that wanted to support us. Like instead of buying gifts for baby and all of that, like if they felt like to to put towards supporting us to make that vision come true.
That's so
And so
beautiful.
that's a really, I really encourage people to cultivate that kind of support from
Yeah.
their community. It can feel really vulnerable, and that definitely was something that brought a lot of things up for me, like asking for financial support from people. But I think it's like shifting the mindset about like we have no issue buying baby gifts for
Mm-hmm.
our friends. It's like,
Which a lot of the
but is that,
time isn't something that we need,
it's not
especially
something
in
that
that
we need.
postpartum period where it's like you need the support as a mother, as a partner. Like there's other
Mm-hmm.
things that we could be as a community helping each other with. And I think,
Yeah.
you know, there's no shame in asking for that help, to be able to
Yeah.
step up and be like, hey, instead of this, we'd love for you to help us get a midwife or support the birth dream,
Mm-hmm.
that we really want to have and that we deserve to have.
Yeah. Or like a postpartum doula, or just
Yeah.
because this is setting up the foundation, like a garden bed for that family
Mm-hmm.
to grow. So it's like just reorienting our lenses to like
Mm-hmm.
the bigger picture. Um, and yeah, so we ended up having a home birth midwives. And yeah, I didn't really do any like antenatal courses or classes. Like they would come to our home and we just talk about birth and how I was feeling and things like that. I think reflecting back on my own experience, I think I was a little bit vague. Like I didn't really set boundaries. Like that was a bit of an edge for me. So I didn't really set boundaries with my midwives and be clear on like what I wanted and tell them like, yeah, like my what I really wanted in my birth. Like I wanted a hands-off birth, but I didn't really set those boundaries. And yeah, for the birth with Forrest, it was I think, yeah, it was a 48-hour labor, and it was really big for me in trusting that everything was going okay. And that's where I was like challenged with like the logical things and the actual embodiment. Yeah, I think my midwife came in the morning just to check, and then she left, and I was really happy for her to, like, for them not to be there and us to just labor at home. But maybe after 24 hours, like not nothing, but because I hadn't, what I thought I hadn't progressed, like I was like, what is going on? Because I kind of thought that labor would just be, you know, straightforward, like that it doesn't
And
stop and start.
if I may add to that, because you were at home, you have that time to continue with your labor as we would, as animals do,
Yeah.
continue with the labor until you were to progress. Whereas in the hospital system, I feel as though witnessing from my own birth and witnessing birth from my clients, that it's in this moment where we can get a bit rushed, or we can start getting offered interventions. And it feels it's a bit challenging as a doula to see that, and see that there's not that trust necessarily. Okay, maybe if it were a high risk pregnancy and there were other things involved and there's reasons for those interventions, then of course we're there to support that. But when it's someone with a low risk pregnancy, there's no other issues except that the labor is taking a bit longer. I feel like we've moved so far away from that innate birthing, that knowing, the trusting of the body physiology of birth, that that's when we're seeing these high rates of C-section and high rates of intervention. And you hear some horror stories, you know, in the birthing world, and it's not to instill fear into people, but I think it's to give them the knowledge and to be aware of what their options are, what can happen, and just really be informed in this space.
Yeah, and absolutely, it's that, it's like to not fear, but to use it to your power of like having the awareness. And I think it's really important to understand like the history of how these medical systems came about and what they're built upon, because then that gives us the understanding of why they are the way they are. And I know in my own birth, if I was in a hospital, I absolutely would have been pushed into like having a C-section, because even home birth midwives, depending on who you're working with and their lens and what they orient to, they're still attached to that system. They still have boxes to tick. They still have things like regulations. A lot of them, there are some that, you know, don't kind of close their eyes to the, you know, they just tick the boxes, but they respect birth and they're more like traditional in that sense. But even with my midwives, I love them, but, you know, after 24 hours she came back, and because I remember, and this is a really important piece that I really love to share with people, because in birth is one of the most energetic ceremonies that we can go through.
Ashe.
We are so sensitive to language, to noises, to lights. Like, that's why animals birth in the dark and in silence and usually on their own. And I remember her saying, you're only just 4 centimeters after 24 hours. Like, my body wasn't doing enough, and my contractions stopped at this point. And I know that was because I didn't feel safe, and I didn't feel supported in my process. So it really,
you immediately were stopped there, like those words immediately stopped, quite literally, your labor.
Yeah, it stopped my labor.
I remember us having this conversation that it is a fight or flight response, and that something like this language being used, because I've seen women go from 4 centimeters to 10 centimeters in an hour.
Exactly.
You know, they may have labored
left
for 24 hours, but that's it. They were at the end of that journey. But for them to say that to you, your body went into flight response. There's danger. Because in the wild, or
exactly.
Back in ancient, and our ancestors, if there was danger around, you'd have to stop the labor. Let's move from this space. It's not safe anymore.
Yeah, and that's its design, right? It perceives a threat. So what is it going to do? It's going to do its physiological purpose, and it's perceiving a threat. So yeah, like, it stopped, and it took me a whole day to get back to feeling safe. And one midwife was very supportive in the sense of, like, your body's got this, but the other one, she felt quite, like, challenged by, why isn't she progressing? Like, what's going on? Like, I haven't witnessed this before. Like somehow all births can be the same when we are all so different. Our bodies are also different, and our babies are also different, and the way that they choose to come to earth is going to be so different, and that they are active participants, like, that we are doing this dance together as mother and baby. So does baby feel safe as well? Like, his babies can feel everything inside of the womb. And it really, it took me, like, coming back into my own center on my own. Like, Cam and my mum were there, but I stayed in the room by myself just to come back to my center. And then the active labor was only 3 hours. It was very quick. So it's just for a first birth. And I think my midwives learnt a lot from that experience, because birth is a mystery, and we can't possibly put statistics and all of these on it. We need to just respect it. Like, yes, of course, there's times where intervention is appropriate and does save lives, and it's not to say that I'm completely against the medical system, but do I believe that that we need it to birth?
There's a time and place.
There's a time and place. And when we understand that, how long have humans been walking the planet for, that we understand that birth is ancient. So it's like, when we look at these medical systems, how long have they really been in place for? And how long has birth been here for? And then it's like, okay, we can see the bigger picture.
Take a pause.
So in I think, orienting back to your question about, like, what are some tips to give to women is, really making sure whoever is coming to your birth, like, having questions of, like, understanding their birth imprints. Like, does the practitioner, like the midwife, the doula, whoever, even your partner, like, getting them to understand their own birth birth imprints, because that can be activated through our nervous system in the space. Also understanding like where are they, like give them scenarios. What would you do in this scenario? Like what are your beliefs on that? So you can just get an understanding of whether you guys are in alignment and you feel good in your body being around this person, because it's one of the biggest events of your life. So who do you want there? Who do you really want there? Who do you trust? Who do you feel safe with? Who does your body feel safe with? Because if you don't feel safe, exactly what you were saying is like the body's not going to feel safe enough to open and to go through that process. And then I think asking about for partners, like how they can best show up, because I think a lot of where we are at as a collective, like men kind of, depending if it is if your partner is a man, like how do they show up in the birth space? A lot of them don't really know, like, or they don't really feel like how do they show up? What's
how do you navigate?
Yeah, how do they navigate? And I think it's really important for to have in pregnancy and the journey of like really connecting to one another through and attuning to one another through the things that you're going to use in birth. So you're going to use breath, you're going to use movement, you're going to use sound. Like that's just a natural part of the process. So can you do that with one another to attune to one another? So in birth you're connected, and going to things like like a beautiful workshop like that you guys are offering, like that's a beautiful place for men to feel empowered and to like understand, because I think when men like they feel equipped and like they've got a purpose, they're going to meet that, because they're going to take that. They want to feel like they want to protect their like innate design is protection, right? Like that's their medicine. They want to like to protect the space. So I think when men are given a purpose and they feel encouraged with that purpose, they're gonna do that.
Yeah, they're gonna go for it and not be afraid and unsure in that space. And that's what we need, is we need the reassurance to feel safe, to be open, and for them to experience. I think it's important that it's also their birth. You know, it's the birth of their baby. They've conceived this, they've made this baby together, and to be able to feel like they have also been a part of the birth. It's also their birth.
Yeah, and that it's going to be the birthing of them as a father, or and whether it's baby 2 or baby 3, it's like that's still a rite of passage, and it's still going to grow you and expand you. And I think another really important aspect is that I see that comes up a lot in the birth space, and it's happened to a lot of friends of mine and just hearing births, is that sometimes men are challenged by seeing their partners in pain. And so I think it's really important to have conversations with each other about like what their fears are and what they perceive as pain, and what is their relationship to pain. Because for me, pain is power, and birth is that it's a rite of passage. You're going to meet a threshold within yourself, because you need to you're going to be growing and expanding and walking through that threshold to be the mother that this child has come for. So it's also like men. So I think it's really important to have those kind of conversations so you can understand, so that when you are met in the birth space with those things, that like you have an understanding of the way your mind works and your fears, so that they don't dominate the space.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Chelsea. So let's talk a little bit. I have a few questions here. I feel like we've just gone on our own journey, which is
I love
perfect.
that.
Yeah, that's it. When it comes to the context of birth and postpartum, what are some insights or practices you can offer expecting new parents? I feel like we've spoken a lot about this, and but is there anything, like if there were one piece of knowledge, what would you give our listeners?
Yeah, I think like for birth, like preparing for birth, like if you are already pregnant, is some of the things that we've already spoken about, like really understanding what your fears are, your relationship to pain, and I also think just a really beautiful, simple thing that I share with a lot of people is like, for me and for you, of what we've shared is like we were so in our logical brains of like consuming all of the information of like understanding birth. But can we to come back into our bodies of like, I think one of the best things of understanding birth is spending time out in nature and with the garden, because then you understand nature's design. So when you go out in nature, you orient to what is true, and when you orient to what is true, you orient to what is just innately within you. You know that, like, just like the sun rises every day, it's going to set, and a flower blooms, and then it wilts, and then it dies, and it's the same as us. Like, we don't think, oh, how am I gonna go to the toilet? Like, it lets your body lets you know when it needs to go, and it just happens. The same with menstruating, like the body just does. So it's the same as birth, and that's what I really encourage women to, like, just come back into the body. Cooking foods, like spending time in the garden, like using our hands, like squatting, like those are the things, like just getting back in the body, dancing, singing. Like, I think singing is also a really powerful tool because it's using sound and breath, and it's shifting energies in the body, and we can really use that in the birth to really bring us into our body and connect like these centers of the womb and the throat.
Which, if you look physiologically, they're the same design. Like there's the design of the throat and our voice box and the larynx and our esophagus, and then you look at a uterus, you know, the design is right. I think we've shared a similar post, which maybe I'll put up after this live because it's so beautiful. And as a singer, that's a big thing when you are menstruating as a performer. This is usually a time where there's more fatigue in your vocal cords. You're finding strain. So also depending, like looking at your cycles and looking at how that affects your voice and your vocal cords and vocalizing during birth. So that was a really beautiful thing you just brought up.
And you as a singer
reminding me of that.
understand that, because it's like we naturally are going to be using the breath and sound in birth. Like, that is just like an innate thing that just comes through to help us with being with the pain and being with the sensations that we're feeling in our body. So if we already have, like, you know, living this as a lifestyle, connecting with our voice, and we're also going to be able to do, it's just going to come through in the birth. And I think also singing can also help with like connecting with our voice and our origin of our womb, so that we can speak our boundaries, we can know how to come into alignment with what we need, and to voice that, what we need, to say no when it's a firm no, and to say yes when it's a firm yes, and have the authority over these rites of passage.
Yeah, I think that's so important, because going into that space, especially if we are, you know, we're not going through the home birth system, you know, we're not doing the home birth, or there are people and families going through the hospital system, knowing that they can say no. You know, you don't have to do any of the tests that they offer. You don't have to do the gestational diabetes test. You don't have to have ultrasound scans. And I think it's important because when we go into the birth space, being able to advocate for what we want. No, I don't want to be touched. No, I don't want you to clamp my baby's cord straight away. Um, because in that space, we're not fully here. You know, we've gone to a spiritual place. We're going out of our bodies. And how then we're supposed to say these things when we're kind of putting our
Yeah.
trust in the system? You know, we trust our doctors, we trust our midwives. So if there's fear in the room and fear in the space, and they're saying, "Oh, we need to do this," or "You're not progressing, so we need to do this," you're going to trust what they're saying. You know, and that's, I think,
Yeah.
where we feel like we lose our power. If I may share, in my birth, I really felt like pushing. And this was just after they said, "You're not progressing, you're only 5 or 6 centimeters," I think I was. Which in both our situations is like, we're almost at the finish line. We've done all the hard work. Like,
If you just shut up, maybe.
please. But the same thing. And I had, my waters were broken, which was something that I didn't want to do.
Yeah.
But in that fear, I was really scared. I'm not going to, sugarcoat it and say that I wasn't. Of course I was. This is this new thing that we're going through, and I didn't feel like I had the support, and I feel like my partner was so supportive, but also was lacking in that foundational knowledge, you know. And at this moment, my waters were broken, so I was on the bed, and I really felt like I needed to push. And in my head, I had, my mum saying, "Oh, if you need to push, but it's not ready, you can, swell your cervix, so don't push." And then I'm in my head, the doctor saying, "Oh, we'll wait 20 more minutes to check," and I've got a little clock in the corner, feeling like I need to push, and I was like holding on, which I
Yeah.
feel like in that moment I should have been listening and trusting my body, um, to the point where I was like, "They need to check now," and I was afraid to put my hand down on my vulva to check my own cervix, to check, because I wanted to know what was going on down there. But I later reflecting, I was like, "Whoa, I can't believe I didn't even think that that was an option for myself, to check my own, check
Yeah.
my baby, check what was going on," and relying on that was the only option, to wait for the midwife to tell me when she was going to check, and I'm there like, "You need to check now." Like my poor partner squeezing his hands, like, "Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I think because Chelsea," I was just
I
reading a
don't
comment,
have
a bit
it.
of feedback.
Is it still?
I think there's a bit, I'm not sure how bad it is. Apologies. We will have to watch back later. Um, but yes, just to finish, maybe I'll let Chelsea talk a bit more because there's less feedback. Yeah, just that feeling like not having a voice and not being able to
Yeah.
check. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
just to add
Yeah. And
to
I'm really, do you feel complete with that?
complete with.
Is there anything
Oh,
you wanted to share? Because I interrupted, so
oh,
I just
yeah. No, I think that was it. Was just adding to that. That your point was being able to advocate, and
yeah,
your partner to advocate for your needs, I think,
yeah,
is necessary.
yeah. And I'm like really hearing you in your story and in your vulnerability of sharing that with us all, because especially when it's the first time when we're birthing our babies, like everything is so new, and of course we want what's best for our babies. We want to be safe, we want them to be safe. And unfortunately in the hospitals, the way that they coerce us to do things is by using fear-based language. And when we're so sensitive, and I think you spoke to this, like how can we advocate for ourselves when we're not supposed to be doing these things. We're not supposed to be here like communicating and having a conversation. Like we're supposed to be in tune with our bodies and bringing our babies down. Like that's where we're supposed to be. So how can we protect the space. And I think that also just highlights how disconnected the medical system is, because they are there interrupting that space. They're asking the woman like the things rather than respecting the physiological process. So I think it's really that's why I'm really passionate about preconception work, because we can understand there, we can go through things like, I think a really big thing for women is this good girl conditioning. And I think that can really come through in the way that we engage with the system of like what we think we're supposed to do, and like we're supposed to follow the rules and tick the boxes, and like all of those things are going to come up in our pregnancy. All of those things are going to come up in the birth space. So I think when we can do the preconception work, or even if you are pregnant, like asking yourself, do you have, like, can you see the archetype of the good girl? Can you see how you people please, or you do these things? Because all of these programs, and what they are programs, are coming up to be cleansed, to be transmuted. And I think it's also really important, like, to reorient as to what we value. Like, I think a lot of, like, I'm not saying that financial like, because paying for a doula, reaching out for a doula and things like that, like some people, like, that's not realistic, it's not in reach. But I think for a lot of people, like, we have no issue with spending so much money on our wedding, or, you know, going on a really expensive holiday. But it's like, when it comes to our birth, like, we can't invest in ourselves, because how we birth is going to affect the rest of our lives. Like, it's just and this is why I love Rochelle's work, is because she really kind of just cuts through the bullshit and just goes straight to the thing of like, we need to learn to hold ourselves as women and mothers, and just be a bit realistic with, like, I know that there's a high rate of cesareans, but like, if that happens, women are going to have to tend to that for the rest of their lives because of scar tissue and things like that. And I think that women don't necessarily think about, because they don't know, because it's not taught, like, what happens in our birth is going to affect our bodies. There's always a consequence.
Get pinches in my scar, and still get, I feel sometimes, especially around my period, I can feel that, whether it's the inflammation on the inside, but I can feel my scar tissue, and it's gonna be there forever. And I'm grateful, it's my battle wound, it's where my baby was able to be born safely. But I think it can be a little bit of an easy option without the proper knowledge.
Without the knowledge of
And
the
it's not easy.
It's not easy. Like, we think, oh, we'll just have like, I know a lot of women like opt, I'll just have a cesarean. Think that's going to be the easy way out, but there's always there's consequences that come with that. So it might feel easy in that moment, but it doesn't mean, like, there's going to be things that come up along the life of being in postpartum. And I think it's the same of, like, we can invest in a really expensive holiday, but, like, what about postpartum? It's like, literally, like, in a lot of cultures, they recognize that this is like a sacred portal that has the potential to bring so much healing to the deeper layers of the body, from not just things from pregnancy or birth, but from whatever is going on in the body. If we meet the body with adequate rest, adequate nourishment, food, body work, and all of these things, that we can bring so much healing to our bodies and healing to our lineage. And I think, women, it's a cultural issue, it's a collective issue. It's like that we want to get back to our lives, and we need to get back to the bodies that we had before we had birth. And we don't think about the consequence of, if we're up exercising after 2 weeks after giving birth, like after growing a baby for 9 months, and to just think about that and the process of birth, that what strain and pressure that's going to put on the body. And it just,
And there's a time for
there's a
rest, and
time,
there's a time for exercise, and a
yeah,
time for, you know, okay, it's not about bouncing back, but it's about reconditioning the body to be able to pick up your child properly and not have back pain
yeah,
or, you know, which is a huge thing as parents, to understand the new physiology of your body because you no longer have the body you once had.
yeah,
Um,
it's a changed
yeah.
terrain.
And just to add to what you were saying about financially, being able to, you know, pay for these services, I think it's important to note that a lot of these practitioners are open to offering you the
Yeah,
help to get that service, whether it's a discounted um, service or a payment
yeah,
plan, or ideas like a GoFundMe, or for
yeah.
postpartum a meal train, you know, finding
Hmm.
ways around that to really support the community and support each other in that work.
Yeah, and that's a really important piece. And I think just to tie it back into what you were sharing before about like advocacy, is like, you know, if we are able to fund someone other than our partners, because our partners can't be our everything in the birth space and in the postpartum. So it's like, yeah, if we can, you know, explore different, if the financial, if, yeah, if the financial, if that's the issue, it's like, okay, yeah, exactly, can I reach out and explain, yeah, ask for a payment plan, or just, yeah, finding a way that feels good for both the doula or the midwife and the parents, so that, yeah, the more support that they have in that birth, the more they're going to feel held, and so that the mother can just, the birthing person can just drop in, and that the father can just be that protection and that support, and that, you know, they feel held by that. And the same with postpartum too. It's like, it's not, if we have more support there, that the parents can just drop into meeting themselves as new parents and meeting their baby and connecting in that way, and that it is absolutely an essential necessity to have community. That is like a foundational aspect to thriving life. Like, we need community, and it's uncomfortable. Like, I think we all say that in we romanticize it, like, oh, community, but like, can you actually ask for help? Can you
Yeah.
actually receive support? Do you, when someone offers you support, do you like, oh no, it's okay, like,
There's no need to be proud in that moment, you know, being open to receiving is
open
a
to
big one.
receiving? And that's how we create community, and that's how we create new ways of supporting one another, because once upon a time this was just the normal, and we can't go back to how things were. Like, Rochelle says this a lot, and I really love this. It's like, we can look back to how things were and learn from it, but we're evolving. Like, we're moving into a new time, into a new space that a lot of us have never walked before. So yeah, we're creating new ways of being, and that means like new ways of supporting one another with preconception, pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, and parenthood.
Yes. Oh, it's been such a good chat. I feel like we were both a bit nervous. I know I was a bit nervous,
I
but
was a bit nervous too.
but this is why the space is here, and I'm so grateful for you to be part of the first episode. Um, okay, could you share any personal rituals or practices that you find particularly meaningful in your own life?
Yeah. Okay. Um, I I think that my rituals and practices have changed a lot since becoming a mother. Like, you know, the space and the time that I used to have compared to now. But what I've really come to realize is that, and this is actually the foundation to why I birthed Roots and Ritual, is how can I be rooted in ritual as a way of life? Because I know in a time when I felt really challenged in my postpartum and really taken to like really dark places, was that this was the only way that I was able to bring meaning to the things that I was feeling. I wasn't able to put things into words and articulate them. So it was through meaningful rituals that I did that helped me to feel honored and recognized and seen by something bigger than myself. So in saying that, as a mother, how can I be rooted in ritual? Like in the way that I cook with my daughter, in the way that I clean, like cleaning the space, like that can be a ritual. The way that we garden and tend to things outside, like that is also a ritual as well. But in more like rituals that I do to tend to myself as a woman, I really, and I think this is such an important one for women, on like starting before we come into pregnancy and birth and postpartum, is like yoni steaming, pelvic steaming.
I was gonna say we didn't even mention that. I was waiting for it to drop in. I was
Yeah.
like, oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's one of my favorites, and I think it's such like, again, like rather than just coming into pregnancy, birth and postpartum and suddenly like I'm going to do all these things that I've never done before, like how can we actually make a connection and start a relationship with these practices and rituals before that? So I love like offering, like I love giving myself that space when Forrest goes to sleep.
It's 11:11. Spirit
Ah,
says yes.
yes, yes to yoni steaming. Yeah, so I love to incorporate that into my life, just putting like even 15 minutes aside. And then it's also amazing for our children to witness that, like, Mom, what are you doing? And then explaining, like, so that becomes normal for them.
There's no
There's
shame.
no shame. And the same, like I find a ritual that has just become a part of my life is like honoring my blood, like just giving my blood back to the earth.
Okay.
And then the same, like Forrest is like, it becomes this beautiful thing that we do together. And so she then has that foundation of what, there's no shame, it's just a natural process of like what mum does to tend to herself.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Do you have any that you
Amazing.
love to do?
Tending to myself. I think body movement is a big one for me.
Yeah.
So Pilates, capoeira. My mum was a capoeira master, so body movement has always been a big part of my life growing up. And that has a lot of spirituality interconnected in that art. Prayer is a big one for me. I find that's like that's my self-care. That's me connecting and really listening to God, to spirit, to connection. And it's beautiful because Hurakan, she sees me lighting my candles and she's like, Deus, for Deus, like she knows.
Bless.
So that's creating that connection. Like we're not I wouldn't say a religious religion in that dogmatic kind of view, like this is what religion is and we're X, Y, Z, but I think in a spiritual sense and a connection to nature and spirit.
Yeah.
Gardening, we're always exchanging our our little garden tips and tricks.
I know, I love it. And I love seeing your garden grow, all of the things that you guys, yeah, it's amazing and
Thank
inspiring.
you.
And
Thank
it's
you. I get so
beautiful.
excited. Yeah.
Yeah, like for you to just have that with Huracan, like
Yeah.
that's her normal, like that's what she's growing up into. And yeah, seeing you pray and move your body and just to be interconnected with nature. And that already is like shifting so much of the culture that we find ourselves in.
Mm-hmm.
And what then, how they are going to come into their menarche, with their first bleed, and then how they then come into pregnancy and birth and postpartum, and then shifting. That's how we
Mm-hmm.
shift it, right?
Yeah, definitely. Oh, it's beautiful. And I was going to ask you about roots and ritual, but you just went there on your own. Um, but I guess kind of just to wrap things up, I feel like, we've just spoken for a bit over an hour and it felt like we just started.
I know.
But as our first guest on Wisdom in the Waters, do you have any parting words of wisdom or advice you'd like to offer our listeners?
Mm-hmm. I think what is coming through is, I think, a really important piece which helps us to shift a lot of like what we're seeing, like the disconnection between the body is, can you get to know your body? Can you actually touch your body and meet your body, not just when you're pregnant and birth and postpartum, but actually like get to know the origins and the anatomy, but not in a way that you need to necessarily know like the neck, like the Latin names or anything like that, but rather just like, yeah, like as women, like, do we know how our vaginas feel before we go into pregnancy, birth, and postpartum? Like, can we understand the landscape of this life-giving space that literally births life? And I think when we do that, then that is going to automatically, naturally just shift the way that we tend to ourselves and be with ourselves. And we're going to heal a lot of shame that we have been programmed into. And also another, in saying that as well, is like that I think a lot of women have a lot of shame around like our natural processes around menstruating and birthing and postpartum and just the natural, our natural biology and the way that it cycles. But it's just, I think the more that we spend time in nature and orient back to nature, we orient back to the truth. And is the truth that there's no way that nature would have made a mistake. There's no way nature or the universe would have created something for us to be ashamed of. So when we come back to that, we can trust our bodies, we can trust our vessels, we can trust life. Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Chelsea.
Thank
I
you for
feel like
having me.
Oh, you're welcome. I feel like we've had so many people jump on. If you missed the beginning of this live, I will be posting, Chelsea and I will be sharing the live, so you can rewatch everything you missed. And I'm sure this won't be the last that you see of
Yes.
Chelsea on here.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say a big thank you for you. Like, thank you for inviting me into the space. And yeah, it's really beautiful to see you stepping into your work and creating this amazing project, a place, like it feels like, yeah, like a place that we can all come to really tune back into these really important conversations. And it's, yeah, very prevalent and needed at this time.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
I love
Thank you
you.
for seeing me. I love you. And we'll see you soon. Have a beautiful day.
You too, and thank you to everyone that has jumped on and tuned in.
And we'll see you soon.
We'll see you
This
soon.
this has been Wisdom in the Waters with Roots and Ritual, Chelsea Hope, and Martina here from Mama Omiaye. Thank you.